podcast which features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to high quality in the early years and school age care sector. In our episodes, we have a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. This podcast series is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance, which offers a comprehensive range of cover at discounted premiums for both business and personal insurance products, so visit www.aricus.ie for more information. In this series, we're introducing and exploring our newest member project, Eco Emotions. To get this series underway, I'm delighted to be joined by Milica Atanackovic, the Learning Strategy Manager at Early Childhood Ireland. Milica's background in early years is rooted within a major interest in creative arts and child participation. She originally studied design communication and then moved into early childhood care and education. She's worked both in Australia and in Ireland, and she considers training and mentoring a key element of quality in early learning and care. She's worked as I mentioned as an educator, service manager, and a trainer, and she combines experience from a broad range, a huge range of creative disciplines in her work. So, Milica, it's great to have you on the podcast again.
Thanks, Maura. It's been a little while.
It's been a little while, but I think you're still one of the most frequent guests. So your passion always shines through. So, Eco Emotions.
Yes.
You know, we've done some work on this already, so it's not entirely kind of brand new, but can you take us through some of the background, what it is, what prompted us to look at the development of resources to support emotional development and nature pedagogy?
Yeah, so I suppose, Maura, as an organisation over the last number of years, we've become very interested in the space of self-regulation and co-regulation, but also particularly, the well-being of children. And along with that, I suppose, like everyone, really interested in how we can support our members and children and families to think about environmental sustainability and I suppose the world around us a little bit more. And I suppose that feeds hugely into nature pedagogy and the value of the outdoors. So I suppose what Eco Emotions is trying to do is highlight the importance of fostering emotional regulation and actually the benefits of connecting with nature from a really early age. And in turn, we hope that by sort of focusing our thinking around, how children are feeling, how they're regulating their emotions, and how they are experiencing their environments and the environments around them. And by connecting with the environments, the natural world around them, they in turn will start to recognize the importance of environmental stewardship. So I suppose one of the long-term goals is that as a project, we'd contribute to a more sustainable and emotionally healthy society for our children and for society, but equally recognizing that it's so important for children that they recognize these concepts at an early age.
I suppose, that bit about self-regulation is so important. And I think it's going to be really helpful to kind of break down the steps because self-regulation isn't something that develops just on its own overnight or with maturity. The adults that a child is engaging with, parents, other adults, the educators that they engage with, have a huge role in developing that concept of self-regulation, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Maura, just to sort of explain to some listeners who mightn't maybe be as familiar with the term self-regulation and equally sort of co-regulation. So for a long time, and when I worked in practice, particularly, we talked really about behavior management. And that was the term that was used. And we've since evolved and shifted, and research has really actually shown us that it's not about managing children's behaviors. It's really about supporting children to understand why they may be feeling a certain way, and in turn, the adult understanding why a child may be feeling a certain way. So, what are the stressors in that child's life that may contribute to a behavioral response that sometimes can be experienced as very challenging or difficult for the children and adults around that child. But actually, when you start to unpack perhaps what is going on for that child in terms of how was their morning, did they have a challenging morning before they entered into the setting? Or is the setting itself, for whatever reason, eliciting feelings of anxiousness or frustration? Is the environment not challenging them enough for whatever reason? Are they being supported to have a voice in the space that they're in? So I suppose we've really, over the last number of years, Early Childhood Ireland, but also myself personally and professionally, have really sort of grown far more interested in this concept of self-regulation, and really understanding that equally, if you yourself as an adult are not regulated, it's very, very difficult to support a child to be regulated. In a very busy setting environment, that can be difficult, that can be challenging. And there's huge amounts of wonderful, amazing, positive things that happen on a day-to-day basis, but there's also those challenges. So some of it more is sort of reframing how we see behaviors and how behaviors are taking place. And while, of course, this isn't a new concept, I suppose what we really would like to do through Eco Emotions is really sort of explore it with our members more deeply, and offer resources and tools to sort of learn from each other and learn how we can really foster environments that, support both self-regulation, but also that co-regulation piece, So while we can offer lots of different strategies around how to support a child, it's equally important to sort of, for you yourself, to take a step back and say, well, how am I feeling today? And what might have happened me before I entered into this environment and this setting this morning, and how to understand our feelings and how those feelings contribute to the emotions that we express on a day-to-day basis.
I think, for me, one of the things is that idea of seeing behavior as communication. And I think the other thing, and it ties in with what you were just saying, is expectations of children. We can be tolerant of each other if we're under pressure, and lash out. Lash out, in terms of a snappy reply to a colleague or whatever. But we can very often have kind of quite unrealistic expectations of children. And I think, we really need, like you say, to understand the impact of, because as adults, we can sometimes rationalize things and we can understand ourselves why we're feeling the way we're feeling. Children don't have the life experience to be able to do that. So they really need the adults in the environment to help them to feel safe, and to realize that these big emotions pass, and that, to help them feel better within the environment, and more, like somebody said, more like a fish in water.
And you know what, as well, more, it's the piece around the co-regulation, not that it's overlooked, but we talk a lot about the self-regulation piece, but for me, what always struck me in practice, and also with my own daughter, is that children really appreciate your honesty in terms of, if, for example, you are not having a great day, we're all human, we all don't have great days, and you're, for whatever reason, you're slightly short with the child, or as you're saying, your response mightn't be how you want it to be. by sitting with them and explaining, I'm sorry, how I reacted or how I spoke was not appropriate, was not okay. I'm feeling a bit stressed today, or I have to get this piece of work done, and I'm just trying to complete it. So there's, for me, children really appreciate you demonstrating and acknowledging sometimes the stressors that are in your life, and that we can't always be happy. We can't, life throws up challenges. And I think it in turn supports children more to understand that it's okay to not always feel okay. And there's days that, you're going to feel more overwhelmed. And the point that you're making, around behavior is about communication. I always think, what is going on for that child? What the why? When you hear about something that you think, wow, that's such a strong reaction. Why have they reacted that way? Or why are they, exhibiting this what I would often say, this distress, what is causing this? So you're so right. Like, we have to reframe and really think about it as it's a form of communication, whatever form that may be, and try to unpack that and see what's behind that. And I think once you do that, it takes a lot of the pressure out of it. I think you start to go, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that before.
Mm.
Now let's try and unpack that and see how we can support the child and support the children and support the environment we're trying to create for everyone.
And I think that brings me to the next point, was that idea, the impact that the environment can have on our emotions. I mean, in many ways, it's very obvious, when we're under pressure, we feel stress. We don't like feeling stressed. And, I know there's a certain amount of eustress that gives us, that push when we're nervous about something. But, too much pressure isn't good for anybody. And sometimes, an overly adult-led environment where, whether that's in terms of, the type of planning that's done, the type of structure, routine in the day, that can, contribute to dysregulation, can't it?
Yeah, it absolutely can, Maura. And just to say, as part of this project, this Eco Emotions project, it's been really important for us to have research, to not make assumptions, so to really engage in research, and to I suppose engage with our members to understand practice and what's going on for them. So we did conduct an Understanding Eco Emotions survey this year. Now, we're still in the process of finalising that report and really kind of looking into the findings and, I suppose, understanding what that survey was showing and how it will impact on the decisions we make for the Eco Emotions moving forward in terms of the supports for our members. But one of the things that it definitely did suggest was that there is a lot of adult-led environments. And what I mean by that, where the educators, I suppose, are making a huge majority of the decisions. And what we know from research and what we know ourselves from practice is that can really limit children's engagement in the environment, but also it impacts on them emotionally as well. When I suppose they don't feel as empowered to make choices, to express themselves freely, and they're key components of developing self-regulation. If you don't feel like you have autonomy, you tend to feel more frustrated. But when children are given, that independence, that autonomy, where they're engaged in discussion and where they have a strong voice, they become so much more curious. They become so much more, I would say, capable in regulating those emotions and those really big, overwhelming feelings. So I suppose, and listen, this is something you have always spoken to, and it threads through so many of our podcasts, but it really is that importance of child-led learning, child-centered learning, and I suppose the Eco Emotions project is just further advocating that and really trying to offer those supports to our members in terms of the resources that we're developing.
Yeah, when we have these kinds of discussions, I'm always reminded of the work of fairy labourers. So, that the key indicators of involvement are well-being and involvement.
Yeah.
And a child can't get involved, or like Tina Bruce says, wallow in play, unless they have time and autonomy and, the freedom to be curious and express their capability. And, and we know that's all at the heart of Ashler as well. So, there's nothing new about it, but sometimes we need to take that leap of trusting children to just take that leap and give them more time, give them more opportunity to become involved, and then they thrive, they flourish. So we've talked about the impact of environments, but it's and emotions. So that's the emotions part of it. But the outdoor pedagogy, the link to the outdoor environment. Can you tell us some of what we know about or what we're finding out about the impact of nature and the role that nature and being outside and sustainability has on the development, the emotional development and self-regulation and co-regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose, we know that natural resources and the natural environment are just really incredibly important, not only for children, but for all of us, Maura. But particularly when we're talking about in the context of childhood, it's really about those opportunities to explore and express, and yeah, to regulate those emotions. And nature-based pedagogy, it really has calming and restorative, it really restores you. It has those restorative effects that really help children to manage feelings of stress, and also and just feeding a little bit back into the survey in relation to some of those findings, Maura. It showed that when children have regular access to outdoor play, and along with that sort of creative activities, they are better able to regulate those emotions and in turn develop that sort of strong sense of well-being. So I suppose one of the reasons why the Eco Emotions project is emphasizing the role of nature pedagogy is because, it's about using the natural world and that environment around us as a tool for emotional and cognitive development as well. So, for example, in Eco Emotions, we're developing suites of resources. One of those is a suite of webinars. So our first webinar that we had, that some of our members may have participated in or joined, that was with Nikki Buchan. And Nikki, as a nature pedagogue, she speaks a huge amount to the importance of nature in relation to children's sort of emotional and physical well-being. So, we believe the two are really intrinsically linked. And that's why, we kind of believe that if children are supported emotionally and through the environment to care for themselves, that they in turn are going to want to care for the environment, the people in it, and the actual environment itself around them. So, to quote that famous quote, if children don't experience the natural world or the world around them, they're not going to, want to protect it. And so for us, it was about making that connection as well between the importance of the two.
And I suppose, if people missed the webinar, we do have a podcast with Nikki Buchan as well, so you can check that back. So that was one webinar. There are others.
Maura,
can you tell us a bit about those?
I can. So our next webinar is with Reggio children. And I suppose one of the things that I often think is really interesting is the idea that we sometimes forget about, that children have a right to access the environment and the world around them. So when we think about environmental sustainability, for example, children have the right to grow up and live in an environment or a world that the adults in it are helping to protect it and to protect their future. But equally, I suppose the Reggio approach very much speaks to all these concepts and all these, ideas that we're speaking about here today around the competencies of children, you know, particularly around how play, at its essence supports, emotional regulation and well-being and self-regulation and that sort of co-regulation piece. So we're absolutely thrilled that we'll have Reggio children. So Maura, there was a huge amount of learning from the Reggio Children webinar, and equally, we have Stuart Shanker, and Stuart Shanker particularly is going to be focused on self-regulation. And we actually have our Breathe course, and that's available on our Inspiring Pedagogy space. And that's a very short bite-sized course, but it's a great one to give you some of those concepts and ideas that Stuart Shanker for years has been sharing and theorizing about and showing how impactful it is to reframe children's behavior and to look at it in terms of self-regulation and co-regulation. So that webinar will have huge insights and also lots of, I suppose, practical ideas of how to implement some of those thoughts into practice.
And I suppose even just to say that if people have missed the webinars to date, they are informing the materials and resources that we're developing, such as the Breathe course you mentioned, and then all the other materials on our new website.
Absolutely, Maura. I suppose for us, we absolutely recognise how busy members are and educators are, and we recognise it's not always possible to attend webinars. So that's why through the podcast series, through our project site, through our learning hub, we're trying to have a suite of materials and resources that can be dipped into, so you don't feel you've missed out on anything. You can come back in your own time and revisit it and get those concepts. And equally we have a discussion forum that will be available and see what other members are talking about and some of their challenges or what's working well for them. So learning, I suppose, with and through each other. And that's something we'd always say, even through this Eco Emotions project, we're not saying we're the experts or the experts in self-regulation or, the experts in environmental sustainability and what that looks like in practice. But we're hoping to, with our members and based on what we see are their needs, develop tools and resources to, really reflect on our current practices and how we can really support children with some of these ideas, and support them not only now, but into the future.
And share some of the great practice that, because people are at different places on the road. So, we've learned a lot from our members over the years who have been incorporating the work of Stuart Shanker and Reggio and so on in their practice.
Absolutely.
So is there anything else you'd like to share about the Eco Emotions project?
I would just encourage members to keep watching this space. We'll obviously be, sharing lots of updates over the coming months and into 2025. We're hoping that it's a valuable resource, and we're sort of looking forward to where it might take us next, Maura.
That's great. Milica, thank you so much as ever for joining us. There's much to think about, and there will be more webinars in the new year. So, keep an eye on our social media, weekly e-zine, and we'll keep you posted about about those events that are upcoming. And so, Milica, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maura, very much.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, spread the word to your friends and colleagues, and stay tuned for our next episode.